there, friends and sane persons. Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. My name is Kyle, and Wednesday Whimsy is a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game topic, a top 10, something game related, usually, whatever I happen to be in the mood for. You can see my Spirit Island is set up back there. That's not what we're talking about today, though. Today we are talking about a brand new game, one of those games that sort of was guaranteed to be a bit of a splash, mostly because of the publisher that puts it out. They always, good or bad, their games are always loud entries onto the scene. However, this one is a sequel to their biggest game ever, and probably their biggest hit. Well, second biggest hit, I guess if you count Wingspan. The game I'm talking about this week is Expeditions. So Expeditions, it has been touted as the sequel to Scythe, or Scythe 2, or a spiritual successor to Scythe, whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, it's more. So Scythe, of course, was a game that came out a number of years ago. It might have been the company's last Kickstarter game that they did. And it was really well known because it had such a striking art style. It was sort of an alternate universe, post-World War I era, where there are these gigantic robots that are sort of roaming around. And they looked... It was originally sold to me as a combination, as sort of a combat version of Agricola, which, you know, it really is not. Scythe is a game that would merit its own discussion another time, I guess. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is Expeditions. And the only reason, of course, I mentioned Scythe is because this is kind of set in the same world. So, how could we say this? Really, kind of Scythe and Expeditions, for that matter, are built around an art concept. There's an artist. I could remember his name if I looked it up. Jacob, something sounding. Well, for some reason I can't seem to find it, but it was an artist who came up with this artwork, and I've heard stories it's also in a video game. I don't know, but it's just this very striking artwork of these large robots roaming around, interacting with people, and then there's a story built around it in the world of Scythe. Well, Expeditions goes back to that same world. Again, we have these large robots. Again, they are roaming around. Again, they are interacting with people, places, and things. And they're trying to get the most points because that's always, of course, what giant robots do. So I will say the theme in this one's a little on the light side. But let's talk about how the game works. So the core kind of mechanism of the game is this little board you have here, and it's not this big board out here, but rather this small board down here. It represents the machine that you have, and you have this little cube, this little action tracker, and it starts on this refresh space, and each turn you're going to move it to a different space, following the arrows if possible, and then you're going to do all three of the uncovered actions, or all of the uncovered actions. So the first time you move it, it goes to this sort of holding box, and all three actions are uncovered. Thereafter, let's say I put it on play, then it would have move and whatever. This one is gather, I think is what it's called. That would be showing. Or right here, you'll see that it's on gather. It means on my turn, my actions will be move and play. And I can do those in any order. Or I can take a refresh, which is going to sort of get me all of my workers back. It's going to take this box and put it back in the refresh zone, and it's going to return all the cards that are in play to my hand. Now, that concept of in play and in my hand is an important one. You sort of have several places cards can be. This area over here to the right, those are in play. But cards can also be in your hand, which is basically to the left of your player board, not actually in your hand. Or they can be tucked under your player mat in one sort of way or another, meaning that they've been scored for some sort of a purpose. and they're going to get you some bonus and some benefits for doing so. And that's kind of where the cards can be. You also have workers. Whenever you are able to play a card using the play action that we mentioned before, you're going to play a card over to your active area. And if you'd like to, and you have a matching worker, you can put it on the appropriate worker spot. And there's just basically by the color. So, for example, if I played this card here, I'd have to place a green worker on it. When you play a card, you get the resource that it shows, its core value. This is going to be one brain resource. Uh, they have names, but not really. I guess Guile is what it's called. And depending if you have some stars already in play, you might get bonus resources as well. So you're always going to get the resource, and then if you activate it with the appropriately colored worker, you're going to get to do the action that the card gives you. And you're just going to kind of go about that. So each turn, it's actually pretty fast, right? It's move your token, do the actions, which could be moving, which is moving your robot. It could be playing a card, or it could be gathering, which means basically you activate the space on which your worker is located, which will get you some other sorts of bonuses, right? It could get you new workers, it could get you more cards, and cards, oddly enough in this game, when you gain a card, it goes directly into play and you don't get anything for it. It does not go into your hand to be played immediately. That makes sense, I guess. It's kind of like a deck building game where you put it in your discard pile. But that's just kind of how the game works. That one takes a bit to get your head around. I find that when I've played this, that gets messed up a few times. Doesn't really matter. Anyway, when you do the various actions, sometimes your cards are going to let you interact with the various tokens and things on the board. One way you can interact is you see these little corruption tokens out here. That's going to be the vanquish action, and you'll have a card. Everyone starts with a card that will let you vanquish, like this tiger here does, or this lady here will let you solve. And those are two sort of special actions. A vanquish means interact with these things, and so you're going to spend those guile or power resources, and you're going to collect these tokens. For example, this token here has a strength of 3. I'd have to spend 3 of the orange resource, and I'd keep that token. That token's worth 2 points to me. But if I'm able to clear off all of the tokens that are on here, well, there's going to be a better action on the other side. And sometimes you can often do that action, or you can do it in the future when you're going to gather. Solve, some cards are called quests. That's the heart icon here. And there was one up there, but let's look at this one here. This is not solve. Here we go. Over here, if I were on tile number 1, you'll see that all the tiles are numbered, and I did a solve action, well, I could spend the resources that this card requires, which it looks like is 1 brain, 1 guile, excuse me. I would get a blue worker, and I would then tuck this card under the top of my board, and it would count as a solved quest. That's one of the sort of glory goals in the game, is to solve 4 quests. And it's one thing cards can be done. You can do with cards. There's also a meld action. There are these meteorite cards, and when you meld it, you're going to tuck it under the bottom of your board, and you're going to score whatever scoring goal it gives you. For example, $1 per melded meteorite. So the first one would get you 1, and then you're going to score not only the one you just placed, but also each one you had previously placed. And having 4 of those is another goal. And then there's also gear, and I didn't see one up here, but it doesn't really matter what it looks like, but it'll have a little gear icon over here, and you can tuck it to the right of your player board, and that gives you an ongoing special ability. Again, doing 4 of those is going to be one of the glory triggers as well. So glory is basically the same stars that you had in Scythe, and if you don't know Scythe, that won't mean a lot to you. But this board over here is it has these goals, and so there's an action you can do to say, hey, I've achieved a goal. And they're not blocked off. Anyone can do them, but trigger it by placing a 4th of these stars out. That's going to trigger the end of the game. So, for example, if I have 4 quests solved, 4 meteorites melded, 4 pieces of gear, 7 of those corruption tokens. That's 7 of the corruption tokens. A special token that's a value of 20. If I have 8 cards under my control, or if I have 7 workers out, or 5 of these map tokens, When I do that, if I do the boast action, is what it's called, it will allow me to place one of my stars. A fourth star is going to trigger the end of the game. At the end of the game, you're going to score points. Basically, the money you collect during the game is worth points. You're going to get points for each of your stars that you have out, and the number of points you get is going to vary based upon how many quests you've solved. So you're definitely going to want to solve a few of them at least. If you've solved 3 of them, you'll get the maximum amount of points. You'll get points for any of the gear cards you have, and you'll get 2 points for each of the corruption tokens that you took, regardless of its value. At that point, whoever has the most points is the winner. I'll say the game is not particularly long. Turns are pretty fast and snappy. And that's pretty much all the rules. There's not a whole lot more that I didn't mention. You will notice I didn't mention combat. Combat was an aspect of Scythe that is not present in this game. So let's talk about what makes the game special. Well, I already mentioned this is a pretty snappy game. It's going to go at a really good clip. Your turns are generally fairly short. It's usually 2 actions, sometimes 3. But if you have a turn with 3 actions, that means you had a turn with 0 actions just a little while ago, usually. So you're always really involved. It's I do this, but it's your turn. You do something. It's back to me. I do something. You don't ever block each other than we can't occupy the same space. So there's not really all that much player interaction, which I guess maybe that's a but. But if you're looking for a game where you can just kind of run your engine and not worry about anyone messing with it, this one has that feature. There's never going to be someone who just jumps in and wrecks your day. Someone could take the card you want or sit in a spot that you want and make you, do something else on your turn, but never really a whole lot of in-your-faceness, which, in many cases is a good thing. There are 5 different machines, and unlike in regular Scythe, in Expeditions, the machines come assigned a special ability. And so you'll have some usually minor special power that you're going to be using in the game. For example, one of them can meld an extra meteorite and solve an extra quest and have an extra piece of gear if he wants, because you're usually limited to 4. Another one can move an extra space. Another one can turn in those map tokens that are kind of useless other than for achieving one of the goals, and just turn them in for a wild resource. It's small special abilities. I don't know that I found anything. They all kind of interact with a different aspect of the game. There's one where all the cards he gets just go straight into his hand, ready to use. Small special powers, but interesting enough that, each play will feel a little bit different. There's a whole big deck of cards that you're going through. I mean, the game is all about getting these cards and finding the right combination in which to play them. And so that's going to add some variety to it. There's a good deal of variety to it. The rules are super straightforward. There's not a whole lot of edge cases. I mean, I've got the rule book here. It's 15 pages, but one page is just about, replacement parts. One page is photo credits. There's a whole lot of pictures and examples in it. So it's a really straightforward game. I could teach it to you in just a few minutes. It's good kind of for any level, right? There's a good deal of strategy and sort of tactical choices in the game because you're going to want to make smart choices. If you just sort of do what you feel like doing and don't have any kind of a plan, well, you're probably not going to do very well. So you've really got to come in with a plan and say, okay, this game I'm doing this and this, and then kind of figure it out from there and adapt. But I really enjoyed that. I mean, and also this game is just a lot of fun. I mean, it's just very compelling. It's the kind of game that you just want to set up and play, and as soon as it's done, you're like, well, okay, let's just try it again. It's just a very compelling game to play. And the artwork's great. If you like Scythe artwork, I think it's largely the same artwork. I think there is some original artwork, but I mean, it's a world that had received a lot of praise previously, and so if Fantasy Flight Games can recycle all its art, why can't Stonemaier Games? Anyway, there's a lot to like here, but especially I think just sort of the simplicity and the kind of the fact that you're really doing your own thing and you can really feel like you're setting up a great combo for yourself, but everyone else is doing it at the same time. There's a lot to like here. Let's talk about the but. And the but, I already mentioned there's not much player interaction. That's some people say that's a negative, some people think it's a positive. But either way, it's not. It's just not really there. You're going to do your own thing. Oh, sorry, another special. It has an excellent solitaire mode. I mean, super simple rules. You flip over a card, it gives you two possibilities. You either do option A, or if you can't do it, you do option B, and then you sort of do a second one too. But just really easy, not really any edge cases. I found the solo mode in this game to be fantastically straightforward and very easy to get into and play. Back to the butts. It can feel like a multiplayer solitaire game because of the lack of interaction. Another kind of a negative, and this is more of a conceptual negative, is that the game uses some weird terms. I already mentioned your hand. I mean, whenever you say this is in your hand, people will think it's going to be in your hand of cards. You're going to hold the cards in your hand, and you're never really supposed to do that in the game. I don't think it breaks anything if you do, but and maybe if you don't have enough space, you might need to. But it's weird, right? You think if something's in your hand, it's going to be in your hand. It calls the discard pile the sweep pile. A bunch of weird, some weird terms like that. I don't know what the point of it was to use weird terms. Also, I will say, I showed earlier, I can turn that off. I showed earlier that little board where you kind of move up and you've got the move, the gather, and the play. I have found it takes a couple rounds for people to understand how that works, as simple as it sounds. And that's just because you move the token onto the action you're not going to do. And I find that that's a little counterintuitive for people. Not a big deal. It's just, as long as you're only picking two of them around, it's basically a fancy way to say you can't do the same two actions each round. And I don't think it's a big deal, right? If someone's having a problem with it, you could just let them do their own thing as long as they're kind of following that core concept. So those are some buts. Again, I will say I wish that it came with maybe not twice as many of the mech minis. I mean, mine are these big metal things. I tried to get them out while I was talking. They're actually kind of impressive, large, heavy. See, it won't come out of the box. Oh, this is impressive. This is great TV, I know. One of mine was a little bit broken, and so I had to glue it. I had to buy some metal glue. But they're these very impressive, large... This is very disappointing. There we go. It was caught on something. But they're these very impressive figures here. And I don't know that the figures are as necessary, right? It's pretty cool, pretty detailed, and it's made out of metal. You can get plastic ones, too, for less money. Anyway, what was I saying? I wish this game had about twice as many. Not necessarily the minis, like I was saying. Those don't matter. But special player boards with special powers, those I just kind of feel like it needs. Also, this big insert here, it has room for two more mechs. Like there's a spot for them. So, I mean, it kind of feels like Scythe again, where they printed two extra factions on the board and said, I wonder what that could be. I just wish they'd sell me the expansion now rather than having me dink around and wait for a year. But whatever, that's their business model. I wish the setup and the layout were a little bit more variable. You've always got sort of the same tiles. There's not really a whole lot of variety. Maybe with an expansion that might change. And, sort of being able to throw a bunch of things together, I think would be a little bit more interesting. But for now, I really like the game. I mean, I think all of my butts are pretty small butts. So where do I come out on this? And I'm going to talk about sort of my rating as the game, and then I'm going to talk about it in comparison to Scythe. So I'd give this one a 9 out of 10. I really enjoy it. I think it's a well-designed game. I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people. I will say, if Jacob Rosalski is the artist's name, there we go. I will say it's not going to be a slam dunk if you like Scythe that you'll like this. They're very different games. They're just fundamentally different, other than the artwork. In fact, it's the artwork and the publisher and the designer that are causing them to be compared. But if this had fantasy artwork, nobody would even think that it was related to Scythe. So I give this one a 9 out of 10 in its current form, whereas I give Scythe a 10 out of 10. So I like Scythe a little bit better, but Scythe is bigger. Scythe takes more space. Scythe takes longer to set up. Scythe is more complicated. Scythe has combat, which many people I play with don't like. So it's although I like it better, I only like it a little bit better. I think this Expeditions is a fine game, a fantastic one that's going to work with a lot of people, and I know it's going to work with me. And but I can't see me thinking, which of the two do I want to play? Just because they're very different experiences. So I think they both belong. They could both fit in someone's collection and not feel like you had the same game twice. And I think that's a good thing. I'm glad that they exist independently of each other and that they don't really have anything in common other than the artwork. I think is a good thing because it allows it allows people to sort of experience them separately. So if you like Scythe, you might not like this. If you don't like Scythe, you still might not like this, right? There's no guarantee here, but I do think Expeditions is very good, and I just wish there were more. So I will say Scythe was probably a 9 the first time I played it, maybe even an 8, but with its expansions, it has grown on me. So this one might do the same. Who knows? I'm talking about it as it is right now. So for me, 9 out of 10. I would definitely recommend anyone play it. And I've only played it at low player counts. That's another point. I've played it at 1 and 2. I don't think I would have any interest at playing it with 5. In fact, I know I would not have interest playing it at 5. And I'm not sure I would really even want to play it with 4. I think this is a 1 to 3 player game. Just because you'd get in each other's way too much, and adding an extra player just adds extra time. So anyway, those are my thoughts. A little bit of a ramble, an expedition through my mind as I talked about Expeditions. 9 out of 10. Go give it a try. I hope you'll love it. I always hope you'll love every game. Try before you buy, obviously. But for me, it's pretty solid. Anyway. That's all that I have for you tonight. I thank you for joining me on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I'll be back in a week, but until then, I'll wish you safe travels and courage when you need it. And come back and join me next Wednesday for the next episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.